Hi, welcome back. In this class today, we're going to be working on the pelvis. You know Lisa, so she's going to be our model, our famous model. So working with the pelvis, and what's the direction of the pelvis? What's the best direction for your body? What's happening with your body? And how can you best understand the direction of your pelvis and the direction it needs to go, okay? So oftentimes we will discover that our pelvis is over-tilting or under-tilting. So when you discover that, which I'll help you understand if you're doing that, then you'll have to make those corrections in your poses so that you're not overdoing or you're not underdoing, okay? All right, so let's get started. Tadasana. Stand in Tadasana. We'll start with the basic standing pose so you can start to see the pelvis. All right, I'm going to have her turn this way so you can see from the side. So we have curves in our body. So you just stand in your normal Tadasana. Don't throw yourself out or anything. We have a lower curve, and then this is more rounded, and then this is more of a curve here. Okay, oftentimes people will have a straight neck. They call this a military neck. And then here, this is not so rounded, and then here, this is a little bit straight as well. So people in their zeal to lengthen are lengthening a little bit too much, okay? So this lower back, you want to have a nice curve to that. Here, you want to have a nice rounding here, not rounding like that, but it's the opposite of this, okay? So oftentimes with the pelvis, people are standing like this. Maybe you take your hands in front of you so they see. So here, the tailbone is lifting up, and this is shortening here. She's got this area right here, which the vertebrae are getting compressed, okay, because she's lifting up here, and then this is dropping. It's not really lifting. So here, she will have a tendency to get that. And if she's in some strong poses or just keeps doing that, and it's probably something that you maybe have found yourself doing because of a couple of things. So remember when high heels were in fashion? I don't know if they're still in fashion or not, but many times people wear high heels. So come onto your toes. It throws your center of balance off, and then to counterbalance yourself, you have to lift your hips up, okay? So that's back 20, 30 years ago, why you would see it a lot. So we're on more sensible shoes now, hopefully, so just be aware of what's happening with your pelvis. So also, when that pubic bone is lifting, tailbone is lifting up, you can see the front part of her body is descending. Her abdomen comes forward, the pubic bone drops. All right, let's do the opposite direction. Now she's going to move that in. Thighs will come forward. Thighs come forward, and there's no tone really in the abdomen. Tailbone in. Most people aren't standing like that, but they're. Okay, so you're doing either one or the other, or you're in a neutral place. So if you're here, you've got the weight on the front of the foot. If you're here, you've got the weight in the heels to help you to stand up. If you don't do that, then you'll fall over. So you want to come to a neutral state. So here are your hip bones. Here's your lower back, your sacral band. Your pubic bone is here. You want to keep lifting up through the abdominal area. You want to lift up through the lower back. So you keep this extension. You have the lower ribs here, keeping the lower ribs lifted up versus sinking down. So here they're dropping. This is lifting up, this is dropping. Okay, so coming to that neutral position. And if you separated your legs, you have something called the pelvic floor. So this is the whole pelvic girdle here. And the pelvic floor, you want to face toward the floor. So here, it's facing back. Here, it's facing up. So coming to that neutral hip, your pelvic floor is facing toward the floor. Okay, so now she's going to come into Utkatasana. She can come right here. So here, she's lengthening here, extending, and she's lifting up here. She's lifting up here, so she can get that extension. I think we showed it at the wall, so come up, turn, come to the wall. Bring your back to the wall. your hips and walk your feet away. Okay, so to first feel the sacrum at the wall, press the feet, lengthen the legs back, and then reach the arms up. So here, the pelvis is in neutral position. Okay? Now she's going to lift up her arms. She's going to have to bring her feet a little bit closer. And as she does that, then she's going to have more space here at the back. Come up a little bit more. Yeah, okay, good. So you want to have, there's at least a hand to be able to fit there, and then reach up, okay? So you're extending your lower back down, you're moving your abdomen in and up, and find that neutrality on the spine. How's that feeling? Good. All right, come away from the wall, come up. So using the wall to get some sense of what's happening with your hips. If your hips are moving to the wall like this, and your arms are over here and you're not able to lift up, then you've got to tilt the pelvis. So show that tilting of the pelvis. Yeah, so the pelvic tilts many different directions. So just bring it to a neutral position. Okay, now sit down in Dandasana. You can sit on a couple blankets. I think you can probably sit on one for now. So another way, in a seated pose, how do you find out if you have a neutral spine, a neutral place on your hips? You find your sitting bones. So your sitting bones are right behind, they're at the buttock. You could press in and find those bones. You want to be right on the center of those bones. So determining where you are on those sitting bones will help you know if you're sitting up straight and if the pelvis is level. So here again, the pelvic floor is facing the floor. The lower back is lifting up, and she's lifting up through here and lengthening. Okay, so she's in a position that was not going to be the best for her back. She would be tilting back like this. Her lower back would be thrown back. The chest would be sinking, and there would be no support there. So the legs are active. Press the hands down. You could even take them back a little bit further or use those blocks, and then lift up. If you can't get that lift, then you're going to come on 2 blankets. So let's just put the second blanket there and see if that makes a little bit of difference for you. Okay, so adjust the buttock. Have a nice wide platform. Extend the legs. So coming to that level pelvis, lifting up from the lower back, lifting up through the side trunk. Keep the front chest lifted. So maintaining that level pelvis, she would go into Parsvottanasana. She could go into many poses. When she starts to bend the knees and bring the legs in a different position, it may change the pelvis. So now take the legs wide. Good. So as she comes into Parsvottanasana, I'm going to have her use it, Upavistha Konasana, excuse me. She's going to take a strap, just take it around both feet. Now her legs are wide. With her legs wide, she can also access the spine a little bit easier. Does that feel a little bit easier? Okay, so depending on where you bring the legs, in what position, what arrangement, you're able to access the spine a little bit easier or not. Okay, so she's holding that strap, she's lifting up, and then she's bringing that levelness to her pelvis. If she wanted to go forward a little bit in that concave action, she would come forward, but remembering not to drop her pubic bone down. Keep that pubic bone lifting up and hinge from her hips. So here, as she moves into that, she's maintaining her legs, she's maintaining the movement at the hips, lifting up from her lower back and coming forward. Okay, so not dropping the pubic bone toward the floor like that, but keeping that lift and then extend forward. Okay, so just want you to see the difference when you're dropping the pelvis and when you maintain that pelvis. So the heads of the femur bone, the thighs, are strongly pressing down, using the legs to be able to keep that pelvic area in a position that will support the lengthening of the spine. Okay, so next we're going to stand up and come into Utthita Trikonasana. So there in Upavistha, we took the legs wide. So now in Utthita Trikonasana, you're going to take the legs wide, but they're going to be doing something a little bit different. So you're turning your right leg out, left leg back. Okay, so here there's a wide space between the pelvis. This leg is pointing this direction. This leg is over here. So the outer thigh is facing that wall. The front of the thigh is facing you. Now here, the front of the thigh is facing here, toward the ceiling. So the legs are in different directions. So depending on the pose that you're doing, you're going to get different accessibility with the pelvis. So in Utthita Trikonasana, you want to keep that level pelvis as long as possible. So you keep lifting up through this side. I'm going to show you with a strap, which will help you to get the idea of what we're doing here. Okay, so now she's going to go over that front leg and keep that outer hip lifted and moving that hip back. Versus, if I let go, she's dropping there through the front of the pelvis. All right, so now lift up. So you're maintaining that space here, and you're extending and lengthening there. Okay, come up. We'll do it on the other side. So even though you're going forward over the front leg in a different direction, you're still hinging from the hip socket. You're keeping that lift of the outer hip. So I'm just keeping that lift for her a little bit to maintain that space, to give her awareness. Good, and then turn the chest. How's that feeling?
Spacious.
Yeah, so when we let that bone crash down into that hip, then the chest gets thrown forward, the hips get thrown back, and now you can see the pelvis is not level. Her hips are moving toward the wall. So here, that back buttock can come forward, left thigh move back. Okay, so you have an idea. So these are just ideas that you can have with you so that as you start to deepen your practice, as you start to practice, you can start to remember some of these things. If you get confused about which direction are my arms going, what's happening with my legs, what's happening with my pelvis. So you'll always have this to watch again. Okay, Parsvottanasana. So we're going to go forward now versus having a wide stride, so turning this direction. So here, the legs are more scissored. The hips are moving in. So the pelvis is more contained. You don't have that open leg position. Now this pose is also a forward bend. So you're bending forward right from the hip socket, but you have to keep this level pelvis again. So the pubic bone is lifting. You're lifting all the way up through the abdomen, through the chest. I'm going to use the strap at the front, just to give her a little bit of extra awareness there. Okay, so she's going to lift up and over. This leg is externally rotating. Keep the foot pressing into the floor, drawing this hip back. This hip is moving in this direction. All right, and then she's going to come up, come down. Keep the pubic bone lifting. Keep lifting up. And then inhale, come up. Let's take the blocks. So take your hands on blocks on each side. So she took her hands down. So just oftentimes your back will round and you're trying to go down like this. okay? So you're going to use the hands on the blocks, lift up, and with that extension, you're going to draw your hips back and lift the pubic bone up. So from the pubic bone lengthening to the navel, navel to the chest. So the whole anterior spine, the front of the spine, is lengthening. You can see what's happening here. This hip is lifting after she's there a while. This hip is dropping. So what's happening in her pelvis? So it's dropping toward the front leg. So keeping that pelvis lifted, you're more able to keep the hips in a neutral position. Okay? So let's do the other foot. Other leg forward. So come up, take the blocks a little bit higher even. So you have a lot of options with the bricks. You can have the brick high or low. Now just watching this leg. This is the leg that you could see, and she did the last time, this side of the pelvis is dropping. So pointing both hip bones forward, keep the hip bones lifted. Keep pressing to the front of the foot. So the ball of the big toe is lifting up. Keep that pressed into the floor. Then now lift your arms up. Press back into your heel, turn your right hip forward. Keep lifting, lengthening through the front body, and then start to go down. So I'm giving her some counterbalance here, so she can move the hips back as she lengthens forward. Now she's dropping this left hip. So lift your left hip bone up, that's it, and bring the hands down. Once she brings her hands down, then she can settle herself, see what's happening in my hips. So lifting this up a bit, turning this down a bit, coming into that neutral position. Okay? So you often see that. This is lifting, so notice where you are in your feet on that. You want to be more on the front of the foot. You want to connect the front leg back into the hip socket, because that will ultimately determine what's going to happen with this hip. If that front foot is just not paying attention, then this hip can go any which way. Okay? All right, and then bring yourself up. And step forward. Okay, last pose. This is a supine position, Baddha Konasana, Supta Baddha Konasana. And she's going to lay down. She's very happy that I'm telling her Supta Baddha Konasana. Everyone is, and then they just flop themselves down and forget about the pelvis. One thing about Supta Baddha Konasana is it can feel pretty comfortable when you start, but if you've gotten the wrong adjustment, the tilt with the pelvis, you start to get a little bit of a lower back ache, all right? So what she's got to do is she's got to lift and you can physically take your hands on your lower back and your buttocks and move the buttocks flesh down. So that way you're lengthening the whole lower back. Now, I'm going to just adjust her back ribs as well and bring her arms. So she wants to bring her shoulders down. The head is lengthening. So here, you still have that extension from the pubis up through the chest. And how's your lower back feeling now? Okay.
Before, when it was like this.
Yeah.
There, it's not so good now.
So when she lengthened the lower back, she gave some more extension to her lower back. Now, it can be that people that really have a lot of lordosis, curve in their upper back, it's going to be quite hard for them to do that. They're naturally going to come like that. So they may have to take a little bit more support on a blanket or something, or have a rolled mat, something to extend their lower back a little bit. You might have to have more height here. Come back and see how that, maybe too far back. Yeah, so there, the difference from the floor to the bolster is not so great. So depending on your bolster size, how wide it is. You just can use any prop, but you have to determine, is it best for your body and what's happening in your body. So here, her abdomen is able to relax and become quiet. She'll be able to feel with the legs spread like that she'll have more space in the lower pelvis and also in this area. Okay, so sometimes we need that. We need to open up. We need to allow the breath to move down a little bit deeper. And with that, we can bring more quietness to our brain, our nervous system, and to our breath. Okay, so now she's going to take Savasana. So often, this is a mistake people make with the pelvis as well. So lying down on the floor, feet on the floor, knees bent, knees bent. All right, so before you go into it, I want you to lift your hips up and take your hands on the lower back, extend the lower back. You see how she adjusted her pelvis, so she's tilting it. She wants as much length to come. Now, your back is not going to be flat on the floor. You're still going to have a curve, but you're getting as much length, so the top buttocks that often gets caught, that flesh can move down, all right? So here she is, then the abdomen, you can see the difference. So let's show when you're not, and then take your legs down. How would that look? So after you're here in Shavasana a while, you start to get tension in your lower back. It doesn't feel good. You're not able to release or relax. The abdomen is being thrown up, and the breath is being shortened a bit. Okay, so now she's going to adjust herself, take the hands at the buttocks, tilt the pelvis, feel that she's on her lower back evenly, on the top of her buttocks evenly. The abdomen is able to drop down into that little cave between the diaphragm, the pubic bone, and the outer hips. So the abdomen naturally wants to adjust and sink down. Okay, now you're going to bring your legs out. Now, oftentimes when people bring their legs out, then they lose it in the pelvis. Okay, so then just readjust. That's it. After you've stretched your legs out, and then take your legs out slightly. If you had that problem, then you might take them a little bit wider. But just be systematic about where you place your legs, so you're just not throwing them out. You want to have the legs continue to be connected to the hip socket and the pelvis. Okay, how's that feeling? So she's adjusted her shoulders, she's adjusted her arms, turning the arm out, turning the palm. Oftentimes, this doesn't get turned. So just taking the time I'm going to just reach up here and drop the shoulder blade. So this whole shoulder turns. Now you can do that on yourself by just pulling the arm down, or by pressing down into your arms and lifting your chest, descending your shoulders. Okay, so now here, she doesn't really need anything for her head. She's already lengthened. So it's like the lower back. You're lengthening the lower back. You have a little bit of a curve there. Here you're lengthening the head, and you have some curve there. Now, if you have any kind of condition in your neck, or you just want something a little bit more supportive, then you can take the blanket, like we've shown before, and then have your head, lift up. Make sure the fold is even, and have the blanket right up to your shoulders. Okay, so again, the forehead, chin, softening through the neck, softening through the throat, softening into the breath. Just be there. Be aware of what you feel. Be aware of the breath. So be aware of what you feel in the pelvis. Can you bring the breath all the way down to the pelvic floor? Where does your breath go? Feel the breath in the chest, breath through the abdomen, through the pelvis. And if you can, feeling even a little bit lower. So be with your breath. Journey with your breath as you inhale and as you exhale. All right. You can stay there in Shavasana. We'll see you next time. Namaste.